me welcome you to global headquarters of Thatcham Photographic Club. I've got no slides today. I thought I'd dive straight into what we're going to do because there's quite a lot to do, but I hope it'll be fun because I've had a bit of a ball doing it, and I'm hoping that you'll feel the same way, in which case we might as well just crack on and use the time we've got to oh, Pete, put it back, please.
No. Oh, no.
So we might as well crack on. And to save a little bit of toing and froing and messing about, I'm going to share my entire desktop today because I'm going to be hopping between Bridge and Photoshop. And rather than keep stopping sharing, restarting sharing every time I switch over, I'm going to keep it going on the whole desktop. So I'll just crack on and do that now. So you should now be seeing the entire desktop, and Bridge should be on the screen. Is that what you see?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep.
Okay. And what I'm going to do is you'll see that I've got a few folders set up, including a Blue Peter folder with things I've done earlier in case we run out of time or whatever. And I've got some cutouts I've done and some textures. So let's dive into the cutouts. So what I did was I went out in the garden and I took some photos of the stuff in the garden and created cutouts from them. And I thought to help you, remind you how to do cutouts, I would do a quick one live on the call now. And I did many of the ones you see using the same technique, but I had to dive in and get a little bit detailed with them on a few of them. And I'll explain why when I do that. So I'm going to start with this fig leaf. So this is the raw file for the fig leaf. I'll just accept all the settings because I think I've done them before. So let's open that raw file into Photoshop. And that you should now be seeing Photoshop. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. And what I'm going to do is a color selection tool. Now, Colin Harrison referred to this, but I don't think he demoed it. So I'm just going to quickly do that. I'm going up to the menu system at the top. There's a select and then color range. And you get this little preview dialog here and these controls. So this is an eyedropper for a single color. This is the plus, so you can select several colors and it will add them together for your selection. And this is a minus, it will take away from your selection. So the very first one, I'm just going to click on the background and you can see that that has selected a little bit, but not everything. So if I now go into the add, it should add the extra bits I'm now clicking on to get a selection of the fig leaf. Yeah?
Yeah.
So if I click OK to that, you'll now see we got the marching ants going all the way around the edges, but all the background is selected. Now I want to use this to make a mask. So actually it's the fig leaf I want to select, not the background. So I'm going to invert the selection. So now the fig leaf is what's selected. Now you may ask, well, why didn't you just do the color selection on the green of the fig leaf so that you select the fig leaf? And it's true on some photos that is quicker than doing it the way I just did. But if you look carefully at this fig leaf, there's a whole load of different colors and shades in there. And to try and do a selection on the leaf itself was a bit unreliable. It took too long. It was much quicker to do it on the background. So the first lesson out of that is the color selection tool works very well, but sometimes it doesn't work very well at all because of conditions in the photo. and other times you may have to select the background rather than the foreground and then invert it, because it's just easier and quicker to do so. And that's what I've done here. So if I now come down the bottom right and use the mask tool down here, the little tiny thing down here, I get my transparent background and my cutout of the leaf. Now, for the purposes of doing the compositions today, I'm going to use the crop tool, which is this one over here. And I'm just going to trim this down to get rid of stuff we don't really need at the moment. So I just trim that down. Don't want all this rubbish at the bottom. We can do that. And now I've got a little bit down here that I don't particularly want, and maybe I don't want the stalk either, but I'll just get rid of this little bit, and that's using standard mask editing tools. So I've gone into the mask, selected that. I now select the paintbrush, and I want black as the color I'm going to paint with, and black as the color you paint with will remove stuff from the object. And for some reason it lost my my crop. There we are. So I'm on there, I'm using the brush tool, and I'm painting with black. So if I zoom in a bit so we can see what we're doing, I'm just going to paint black around here. Just get rid of that little bit and tidy it up. And that'll do.
Could you use a Riz instead?
You could, but I'm using a mask here, and that's a non-destructive process. So with erase, if you mess it up, you've got to use the undo, undo, undo to try and get back. And if you've saved the document, you may not have the undo available. So the mask is a much more convenient way to do it because it's non-destructive. If I ever want to get back any of the bits I've taken out of the picture, I can do so. And again, I can disable the mask and everything comes back, or I can re-enable it. So generally speaking, Adobe would recommend that you mask things rather than erase them. So that's my fig leaf. I'm going to save that file in the demo area. I'm going to call it fig leaf to be imaginative. Okay. Now I'm going to refer to my crib sheet because I've built some notes up so that we can, come on. Bear with me. There we go. So that's good. I'll just show you now some of the other cutouts I've done. I used the same technique on this. Now you could say, well, look, that's not a pin sharp image. It's a bit slightly blurry, and it's true, it is. But I'm going to let it ride. And the reason is that when we do these comps, you'll see that some of these are going to be real small in the image. And yes, in an ideal world, I should have taken time and got a sharper image, but for the purposes of what we're going to do today, it's going to be okay. And you'll notice using the color selection tool, we've got some transparencies in amongst the leaves here, which is what Colin was going on about with that color selection tool. This is an allium, so it's really nice sort of starburst, fireworky kind of pattern. There's the fig leaf. This is, can't remember the name now, it's a gaura, a pink gaura. And when I said the selection tool, the color selection tool doesn't always work, if you're photographing a white object against a white background, it gets a bit messy. And like an idiot, I used a white background to photograph this, not thinking that that was going to get in the way of the cutout. So instead of reshooting it, I just did this one manually. I manually cut this out, which took me a long time, but I did it mostly for the practice of painting and cutting out. It's good to keep the muscle memory going, so I invested the time to do that. So runner bean flower, and that is a salvia. And you know, that would have been a nightmare to cut out manually, but I did the color selection tool on that and it worked a treat. And you'll see there's some transparencies in amongst the petals of the flower. Oh, there's a couple more. This is a sedum, and this is a verbena flower head.
Because he's crackling like mad and we can't hear
Sorry,
him.
I can't quite hear you.
Can Paul mute his mic because it's crackling like mad? That's Paul Roberts, by the way. Can't hear what you're saying half the time.
You can't hear me properly.
Paul's mic starts to crackle.
Oh, Paul's mic. I haven't muted you, have I? Perhaps I should mute you all. That's my bad. I should mute you all. Is that any better, Malcolm?
Yeah, that'll be a lot better. Cheers.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. I forgot to mute you. Okay, so that's a verbena.
That's great.
Now I can still hear people talking. Has anyone got a mic? Oh no, everyone's muted. Okay. I hope it's not me.
I've turned mine off.
Right, so there is still a crackling. I can hear it now. Can you hear it, Malcolm?
No, I can't hear it now. No.
Okay. Anyway, that's the cutouts. We're going to use those. We're going to use those when we create our comp. It was my volume was up too high, so I've turned my volume down a bit. Okay, good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this here leaf cutout that we did, and I'm going to play with it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the canvas size of this picture much bigger. So it's at 3,000 at the moment. I'm going to go 10,000 wide by 10,000 high. That's going to give me a nice big square canvas. I'm now going to take this image and I'm going to scale it down a little bit and stick him up there. And now I'm going to duplicate this layer. So I'm just going to right click the layer and duplicate. Doesn't look any different because it's placed exactly over the top. But if I do a transform, this is a edit free transform, I can rotate it. So I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And then I'm going to drag it over here and stick him right about there. I'll duplicate that layer and I'll transform that one another 90 degrees. And likewise, final one. And you begin to see that we're now getting a bit of a shape. Now, just for fun, I'm going to take one of those other cutouts. Let's take the Achillea. And I'm going to pick up the layer for the Achillea and I'm going to drop it on this one. And I'm going to plonk him in the middle. You're now beginning to see how you build up these composite layers and these imagery. Now, if you look at my layers over here, it's getting a bit messy. So to keep things tidy, if I select the fig leaf layers and I get it up so you can see it. And if I click on this one here, which is a group, or you can right click and create group from layers. We call it fig leaf. It's now put all those fig leaves in a nice convenient little group for me, which keeps this a bit tidier. I can see what I'm doing. So if I now save this, in here as my fig leaf ring, because I did 4 leaves in a little ring, then I've got myself a fig leaf ring. Now I'm going to crop this down. Remember, I made the image super large. Come on. Let's just crop it down. So now it's the size I need it. Actually, I won't do that. What I'll do, up here, when you're in the crop tool, you can select the ratio of 1:1, which means it'll be square. And if I just drag one of the corners over, it will drag the whole thing square, which saves a little bit of time. As this is kind of a round bouquet kind of an image, cropping it square actually makes things a little bit easier. Yeah. And the size of that now is down to 5,000 odd pixels. So although I made it 10,000 odd pixels to start with, that was just to give me enough space to work. I've done my arrangement now, and now I've cropped it back down to something a bit more useful. Anyone got any questions on that? I've rushed that a little bit, but what I did there, we have done a number of times in terms of doing masks and transforming and layers and groups and things like that. So hopefully that should be vaguely familiar. Even if you don't remember exactly how to do it all, it should be vaguely familiar, the techniques that I've been using. So that's a fig leaf ring with an Achillea flower on top to make a little kind of blossom or bloom or whatever you want to call it. So now I'm going to create something else. Let's save that. Let's close that. Now this is taking a little while to save because I've been using high-res RAW files and combining them together. So that starts to multiply the size of the files very quickly. If you want to have a look at those files, our fig leaf ring, wait, I didn't want to open you. It's actually 370 megabytes now. You see that? So these files get real big real quick. Now that's okay because I like to work with the best resolution and the high quality, so that when you scale it down, you've still got high quality. But if ultimately you're going to make these things real small in a small image, then you can afford to downsize them and reduce the file size. But I'd rather keep the file size as long as I possibly can. So I'm now going to create another one of these rings that I created with the fig leaves, but I'm going to create it with this salvia image. So I'll open him now, and then I'm also going to create a new image, and I'm going to make it 3,500 pixels by 3,500 pixels, because that's a nice working size I found in doing what I'm doing. It's a bit of a compromise between the file size and the quality. But you can choose whatever sizes you want. You can scale them to whatever you want. This salvia now, if I grab the layer and stick him on my new image, you'll see that the salvia is way too big. So if I zoom out a bit and do a transform on it, I can transform him down to a more manageable size. And what I want to do is roughly half the size, because I'm going to make a ring out of this. So I want this to be roughly half the size so that I've got space down here for another one, because it'd be too high, too TWO high. So I'm going to put that there, but you'll notice this is not quite straight. So I'm going to straighten it to help me do the alignment I'm going to do next. So I've dragged over a guide, and now I'm going to rotate this just to get it roughly aligned down the middle, give or take. So that's now, reasonably straight. I can get rid of my guide. Now I'm going to use the same technique as I did before. I've got a spare layer here that I don't need now. I'm going to duplicate this layer. And I'm going to rotate this one as I did before. So a transform. Now, instead of dragging it to rotate it, because when you're dragging to 90 degrees, that's pretty easy. But this time I want it a bit more funky than that. So I'm going to drag it 30 degrees, and you can enter the degrees up here. So if I type 30, it has dragged it to 30 degrees for me. Now I don't need the straight one, so I'm going to get rid of that. I only want the one that's at 30 degrees. You'll see why in a minute. Now I'm going to duplicate that. For this one, I want to now transform 60 degrees. A little bit of geometry going on here. You know there's 360 degrees in a circle. And I'm actually arranging these at 60 degrees apart, but 30 degrees from vertical. That's why the first one was at 30 degrees, and all these are now going to be at 60 degrees. So everything's going to be at 60 degrees. I could have done it with the vertical and done it all at 60 and then rotated the whole thing 30 degrees. I could have done it that way. Whatever turns your handle, as they say. Another 60 degrees. Bring him over there. You see the kind of pattern that's emerging that I'm going for here. last one. At 60 degrees. And we got ourselves a little starfish going on now. And what I'm going to do is I'll drag a guide down, because this last one I did needs to be pretty much in line with this one. And if I drag the guide down to the bottom, just to check whether these guys are in line. So this one was, that was 1, 2, 3, 4. So the fourth layer, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I drag this guy now out a little bit and align him, that's not bad. So now again, I can get rid of the guide. And what I'm going to do is select all of the layers and create a group. And we'll call that the salvia. Now, it's not quite filling the space, so I can make it bigger, the whole thing bigger. Because I've put it all in a group, I can now treat the whole thing as a single object. And that gets me, the controls for zoom keep popping up and obscuring the Photoshop controls. So now I've got that. Yeah, so that's not bad. And now I want to do, it's still not right though, is it? I tell you what, let's duplicate it. I'm going to duplicate the whole group. So again, because I've created a group out of this, I'm treating the whole thing as a single object. And now I can use exactly the same technique again, transform, to rotate the new group. Yeah, you get the idea of this. These techniques, they're all pretty simple. Obviously, you've got to master them. But once you've got these real basic, do a cutout, know how to manipulate a layer, know how to transform objects within the layer. The transform tool is so useful because you can scale objects, bigger size, you can rotate them. And later on, you'll see you can even distort them. So that is a really good way, a good technique to learn, is how to do cutouts and how to do the layers. Yeah. Now that's that one. If I save that now, we'll save that as salvia. And that's all nice and dandy. Let's see how big that beastie is. The salvia ring. It's only a couple of 100 megabytes, so that's all right. And what I'll do is I'll show you a few other rings, my Blue Peter rings that I've done. So here's one, and that's using those, I'll go back to the cutouts. That's using these, the Gaura, there's a Gaura pink and a Gaura white. And what I did with those, with this one, is I created a ring of the white. So here's all the white ones, and I created them pretty much the same way as you just saw me do. And similarly, the pink, I did that. The difference being that with these ones, they're not on, I could have done it with degrees if I wanted to, but I also created myself an alignment tool. So you'll see now I've created a line, and it's just a single vertical line, but what I've done to it is the same as I've done to everything else. I've just duplicated it and rotated it a number of degrees each time to create this shape. And then when you're placing your objects on it, you can place them on those lines so that you get a nice alignment. And you'll notice that these aren't all going to the center. And the reason is that I put myself in a little center circle and I aligned them to that. So you can use all these basic tools that you know and you've been playing with, but in a slightly different way. So I've aligned them to that. The other ones I aligned differently. What I did with these ones was I aligned this point and the bottom point with the line. So I did that all the way around. So you get this Catherine wheel effect because the object is actually bent and going in a certain way. So I just aligned the two tips, the end tips of each flower, with the guideline that I created to get the Catherine wheel effect. And the white gowras are straight, so they're aligned dead straight with the guidelines. And then you turn the guidelines off because it's a group like the others. Yeah, makes sense? And once you've got these objects, you're building up building blocks. So you start with single flowers and you build a little group, a little shape, a little texture, a little something, a little bouquet, and then you use that as a building block to build something else. And then you use that as a more complex object to build something else. And that's the way it's done. You just build it in groups and layers, and you just keep layering them in and grouping them up as you go. And once you've got objects like that, you can then arrange them in a different way. So I've now got this fig leaf image. And what I want to do is actually do something a bit more interesting with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another image, a new image. I'll do the same, 3500. Oh, actually for this one, maybe I'll do something a bit bigger. Let's do, I don't know, 10,000 again by 10,000. With a transparent background. So that's a nice big space. And then what I'm going to do is I'll save it for the moment, save as, and I'm going to call this, because this is going to get big, follow path. And now I'm going to draw a circle on here. And this is the draw a circle tool, the ellipse tool. You've got several tools here. You can draw rectangles, rounded rectangles, da-di-da-di-da. This is the line tool. That's how I drew my guidelines for the alignment of the other flowers, the Catherine wheel. But I'm going to use the ellipse tool to draw a circle. Now, you can use this tool in 3 different ways, and I'm going to show you one of them, but I'll point out the 3 different ways. Now, normally when you think you're drawing a circle, you're actually drawing a bunch of pixels. You're drawing a filled circle. It's got an outline, it's got a fill, but you can actually use this to draw what's called a path. And you do that up here. In the top left corner, you see I've got the ellipse tool selected here, and it's giving me some customization options. If I click on that download, I can have it as a shape, in which case I can change the outline color and the inside fill color of the object that I draw. I can use pixels, which is literally going to draw a circle and fill it with pixels of all the same color, and you can't really change it. It's a more restricted way of drawing. Or I can do path, and I'm going to use path. And what I'm going to do is draw this circle like this, give or take. And you'll notice it's just a line with some cut 4 handles on it. But what I can do now is I can make objects follow this path. Now I'm going to go back to my fig leaf, and I'm going to create this and make it a pattern. And the way I do that is I go up to Edit, Define Pattern. What do you want to call it? I'll call it Achillea fig. And that's it. I don't need that now. What I'm now going to do is get the pattern that I've just saved, and I'm going to place it around this path. So I'm going to go up to Fill, Edit, and Fill. And in Content, you have a few options. Normally you'll see it's black or white or 50% grey, but I'm going to select Pattern here. So I'm going to fill with a pattern. I can choose my pattern here. Here's the one I just saved. And I'm going to tick, that was a bit quick, let's go back. It jumped the gun on me. You see that this tick is on script, and in here I've got a few choices, and I'm going to tick place along path. So there's a couple of things, you know, these are a few steps you've got to remember, and I've written them down, and I can send you this as a list of instructions if you want to have a play later. But what this does is it's going to place that pattern along the path that I've drawn. And as this thumbnail shows, it could be a wavy line, but in this case I've drawn a circle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale my image. Remember, the images are really big. I'm going to say I only want this to be 35% of the actual original. I want you to adjust the spacing so it fits. And I want the scale progression to be 100%. In other words, I want you to place every object on the path at the same size. Ooh, this is fun. Now that's not quite right because I've got a gap over here. So let's undo that. I've found that this tool, you have to keep experimenting with it to get the right fit. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to make the circle a little bit smaller. And then it might fit. Edit, fill, pattern, place along the path, scale 35%. That's a bit better. So this, if you wanted to place these pictures around a circle manually, you'd have to do that alignment thing I did and then place them. And it's doable, but there's also a tool that will do it for you. So you can do it whichever way you wish. But I kind of quite like this tool and thought I would demonstrate it to you. If I wanted to, I could have said scale them. So every time, let me show you, every time it did it, I could have said the scale progression is 105%. And you'll see that this one is a lot larger than that one. I could have made them bigger and whatever. So that is quite an interesting tool. You may or may not like it, but I thought I'd show it to you.
Ray,
Yeah.
is there any way you can determine the number around the circle? Because when you're at 100, I think there's 7, isn't there? And then when you went to 105, it went down to 6.
Yeah.
So can you, because 7's an odd number, I was assuming there was going to be 8 there, actually.
You're right. The way I've found to do this is you experiment with the parameters there. So these parameters are the ones, there's no way of saying I want 6 of them.
Right.
Which is annoying. So what you do is you change the scale of the object it's going to place. So make this bigger or smaller. You change the size of the path, as I did. I scaled it down a bit. And for example, if I change this now to 40%, you get your even number.
All right.
So you got to experiment with the size of the circular path and the size of the objects you're placing to get the balance you want. Unfortunately, there's no, I want 6 of them, I want 7 of them to do that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Now this path, we want to get rid of that. So the way to do that is if you come over here with your layers, you'll see up there, there's paths. And if you click on that, you'll see it's selected. So just click anywhere off of that and then back to layers and you'll see our path has disappeared. The path is still there. So in terms of a non-destructive process, if you change your mind and you want 7 objects, you can go back and redo it because the original path is still there. You just have to go back in and select it. And hey presto, there it is. Okay, that's good. Now let's do something else. I've got a salvia ring here that's quite nice. So let's put that one in. Not big enough, so I'm going to transform it. Hello, didn't do it, scale it properly. Now you know why I offset the first one when I did this, but it's still not quite right. So I'm going to rotate it a little bit to get it roughly right. But you'll see, you know, these are all things you can experiment with. Now the problem with that is I don't like it being on top of the green. So I'll just drag it underneath the other layer and make the green come on top. I think that's nicer. And again, if I wanted to duplicate that, I can do so. And again, rotate it so that we got some behind there as well. You can basically do whatever the heck you want. Sorry, I have to keep moving Photoshop. It's just the zoom controls are in the way. So you're seeing now that I'm just building up these things to be more and more complex. So this started out as a single fig leaf. I then made a ring of 4 of them and added a flower on top. I've now used that as a repeat to create a posy kind of effect. Similarly, the salvia was an individual plant which has now been repeated so many times to create a sort of a starfish kind of shape. So this is what you're doing. And I'm not a terribly creative person, but I've been quite pleased with the results I've been getting. You guys being as super creative as you are, I can't wait to see what you're going to do with this. I really would love to see some of you creative guys go off and have a crack at this and see what you can do with it.
Because this could be done with cut-out heads, couldn't it?
It could be done with anything, Paul. Yeah, yeah. You know, tractors, car tires, nuts, bolts, screws, anything at all. You can do this with. Now, that's fine and dandy, but I want more. So I'm going to save this beast. That's still saving. It's a pretty big file now. Let's see what our follow path file. Oh, we're at 800 megabytes now. So yeah, your machine is going to chunder along a little bit when you're saving files, and God help you if you try and copy it onto a memory key. You're going to start chewing up a bit of storage here. But like I say, once you've got this done, you can then cut it as a JPEG file and downsize it to your heart's content. So you can downsize it to something a bit more reasonable. Yeah, we're at 800 megabytes now, and we're not finished yet because I want to use this.
Right? Can you change the background colour?
You can, of the image, absolutely. You could put another layer on with a background in. And in fact, that's precisely what I'm going to do now. Thank you, Tony, for that. I will send you a check for giving me a prompt at the right moment. So let's go back to this beastie, and that's now saved, which is good. Because I want to use some textures. Oh, that's not in there. It's probably there. I went out in the garden and took a picture as the sun was setting of the fence. And I thought, well, that might be fun. So let's put the fence in here. Let's put him underneath for now. So I've just changed the layers. Get this over here a bit so you can see what I'm doing. Is that a bit better? So you can see the layers now. So I've put the fence in. I'm going to transform him to make him a bit bigger. So now I'm going from a square object to an oblong object. Okay, that's about right. Let's save that. Yes, apply that. Okay, so that's fine. So Tony, there's your background. You could be anything you like. But actually, I thought it might be fun to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to put him on top, which seems odd, but now I'm going to change the blending mode. And I'm going to come all the way down to luminosity because I think that looks kind of cool. And here's like a street art pastel painting on a fence. We started with one fig leaf. We multiplied it into a little ring. We put an Achillea flower on top. We put salvias in. We repeated those into a Catherine wheel. Now we've turned it into a bit of street art just by using bog standard layers and a blending mode on the layer. Yeah?
Yeah.
What about you? I think this is fun. I think it's great fun. That's still saving because it's probably getting close to 1 gigabyte now. So while that's saving, let me close some of these down.
Ray,
Yes.
you could have just painted your fence, couldn't you?
Say again?
You could have just painted your fence.
Yes, I could. I definitely could. Well, now I'm going to paint some buildings because you remember Colin showed some of his compositions on the sides of the Getty Museum in New York. So I thought that would be fun too. Haven't got the Getty Museum, but I've got Reading Station. And here's Reading Station. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to put some of our compositions on these panels? Now, to do that, these have got to be behind the foreground details. So I've done a cutout. There's my cutout. It was rough and ready. It's not perfect, but it's a cutout. So I just duplicated the layer and then masked the top layer so that I've got a gap between the foreground and the background, which means I can plonk things in between and they will be in front of this, but behind this. So let's go with our fig leaf. It seems to be a popular picture today. So let's grab him. And let's grab all of that and drag him onto here. Okay, now that's way too big. So I'm going to zoom out a bit and transform again. To something a bit more like the size we'd need to go on that panel. Now this is a new trick because you'll notice we got a perspective going on here. So we need to make this follow the right perspective. And at the moment, this is on top of these guys. But that's all right for now. We'll change that in a minute. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the Edit menu and the Transform menu. Now, what I was doing before was I was using Free Transform, but this time I'm going to use Distort. Looks the same, the handles, but what it means is you can move each handle separately. So what I'm doing is matching the perspective of this panel, give or take. It's about right. And there it is. But that's no good because it's over the top of the handlebars. So let me drag him. Actually, I'm going to make a group out of him because he's There we are. I'm going to drag him in between those two layers, and now it's behind that. So that was good. But we've got so few others we can use. We got the salvia ring we can do. So we'll do that too. Stick him on there. I'll make him a group as well. He's group 2. I'll transform him to get him down to the right size. Hello, didn't mean to do that. Just get him roughly the right size that I need. There we go. And now I'll use that edit, transform, distort again. And this time we'll fit him to this panel. And you'll notice that he's going to go behind the handlebars. Here you've got to guess the perspective distortion at the bottom because you haven't got a reference line. Well, that's probably not bad. Get the idea?
Yeah.
And now I can do the same with maybe an individual plant. Let's go back to my cutouts and let's have the white gaura, as it took me so long to cut it out manually. I will stick him in there. Same deal. Let's transform him down to about the right size, give or take. And now I will use the edit, transform, distort to do the same. Yep, you get the idea.
Yeah.
Let's save him. Not sure how big he's going to be. Maybe not too bad, but we'll see. That was Reading Bicycles. Yeah, only 120 meg, so not too bad. Whereas our follow path is 1.67 gigabytes now. Okay, I got one last thing to show you, and I'm aware of the time, so this shouldn't take more than 10 minutes or so to give you the idea. I thought it might be fun to see what we could do with a 3D object. So here's a jug. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my fig leaf ring on it. And I'm going to select all of the layers here. And I'm going to do an edit. Sorry, no, I'm not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a select all with all of the layers. So that was a select all with all the layers down here selected. So I've now got everything in that image, and now I'm going to edit copy merged. So that's put it in the workspace. I'm now going to paste that. Paste. So you'll notice it's a single layer. There's no multiple layers there. I've just taken it as a single merged layer. And there's a reason I've done that. You'll see that in a moment. Let's transform it to get it down to the right sort of size. I want it round about that will do, I think. And I'm going to rotate it because I am told by my wife, who's my creative mentor, that it looks better this way up. So, and I'm going to accept that transformation. So that's that. Now what I want to do is I want to put that on the jug, but I want the image to follow the curve of the jug.
Wow.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my edit, transform, distort again, same as I did with the Reading bicycles picture. But this time I'm going to align it roughly with the sides of the jug to get that perspective correct. And while it's like that, in that mode, if you come up here, you'll see there's a rather funny looking button up here. And this is called the warp button. So I'm going to click that. And then on the type of warp I'm going to use arch, because this is an arch. And it's warped it, but the wrong way. So I'm just going to drag it down the right way and roughly match the curve of the jug. So that's made the perspective of the flower composition kind of match the jug. But, you know, to me, that doesn't look terribly realistic. It looks like it's been photoshopped. So I thought, well, I wonder what would happen if we use that luminosity blending mode again. And now it looks like the jug's been ground or etched or engraved with our picture.
Mhm.
Again, I think that's pretty cool.
Oh, okay.
And we can save that.
Just goes to show you can never believe what a picture tells you.
Yeah.
Now, I know that was a bit of a wild tour and it may be way outside your comfort zones. I do respect that. But the request was to show you what Colin Harrison did. And that's what he did. He downplayed it, but then he is a member of the Royal Photographic Society. So to him, he's probably doing it so frequently with all of his work that he doesn't really think about the complexity. And on the face of it, yes, there are some complexities there, but actually the individual steps are things that we've covered a number of times. Taking an image, photographing it to help you do a cutout. I photographed those flowers knowing I was going to do a cutout. So I put a white background behind some, and some I shouldn't have, and a black background behind others, so that I could do the cutouts more easily. So if you know you're going to do cutouts, photograph it accordingly. But then, so the cutouts were relatively straightforward because of that. Then what you're doing is taking those cutouts and just putting them on layer upon layer upon layer and manipulating them, rotating them, aligning them geometrically. It helps to know a little bit about how many degrees there are in a circle, because it can make things a bit quicker. But you don't have to, you can do it by eye. And as you see, once you start scaling it down to the size that you're going to use it, if your cutouts aren't perfect or your alignments aren't quite right, no one's going to be taking a microscope to it to notice that. So, you know, you don't have to be that mad about doing really, really ultra fine cutouts. You can be a little bit, not slapdash, but you don't have to pay that much attention as long as it's okay. I mean, sure, if you want to start putting these images on the side of a building, or really on the side of a building, or you want to print them to an A3 or A0 size and hang on your wall, you may want to spend a bit more time ensuring that the cutouts are absolutely crystal clear and perfect. But I would suggest you learn the techniques first before you try and do that, because otherwise you'll disappear down the cutout hole where I mean, the white Gaura, because I photographed it against a white background, I should have gone out and put a black background and photographed it. Instead, I spent 2 hours doing the cutout for one flower. Now, okay, you could say I wasted my life there, 2 hours of my life. I maintain I did it for a very good reason, apart from the fact I was too lazy to go out and shoot it again. But actually, I've got a new graphics tablet. I was playing with that and learning how to use it and getting my muscle memory so that I can do these things more quickly. That's my excuse. I'm going to stick to it. But so you don't have to be too mad with your cutouts, but you do have to know how to manipulate layers. You saw I used the blending mode a couple of times. You don't necessarily have to remember which one to use. You can go down them all and it gives you a quick preview of each one. You keep going down till you find one you like. That's the right one for you. So this, although it looks heavy and complicated, actually, when you start to break it down, it's not that bad. And I tell you what, I've had a ball doing it. It's been a real good bit of fun, going out and shooting the pictures for the job, selecting them, doing the cutouts, preparing them, and then doing the comps. I've had a great time doing it. And I really like the jug thing. And I'm going to show one last image with you that I had fun doing. Can you see Photoshop now?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll notice I've got a silhouette here that I found on Tinternet. Silhouette of a butterfly. This is a gigabyte odd file, so it takes a little while.
Mm.
Now you can see what I've done. So the silhouette cutout is on the top. I've got a group here, which is all of these guys. So I've got a cluster of the Achilles. I've used all the cutouts that I had. I threw them and the kitchen sink into this. So I've got a couple of these that are really big in the background. So the background are these flowers, salvias. The alliums are here, giving you a nice funky background. Then you've got the Achilles following the path, but on top of the Achilles, I've got another ring So I've got rings on top of rings there. And I arranged all that and made a group out of it, and then thought, well, one's not enough. So I just duplicated it to do the other side. And then I had some transparent bits I wanted to fill. So I just duplicated them again until I filled the transparent bits. This image might get printed and put on the wall. Although,
or even Ray printed on fabric and start making COVID masks.
yes, that's true. But you'll notice I talked about cutouts. Look at these fringes on the outside of the allium. I'm going to have to go back and redo the allium cutout. That's probably another 2 hours of my life there. Because you'll see that fringing, actually, when you start to look, the fringing is everywhere, and I don't like it. I want to get rid of it. But you get the idea. You can start, doing all sorts. And that's just one image on top of another, on top of another, on top of another, grouped, duplicated, rotated, twisted, added, stretched. Yeah? All the same technique. It's just putting it all together. So, guys, anyone going to rise to the challenge?
Definitely.
So, to help me go through all this, I wrote pretty much all those steps out as a little script. So, more than happy to share that with you if you want to. You'll have the video as well. So you should be able to follow the video and follow the steps. I think I pretty much stuck to my script. So if you follow those down, you won't go far wrong. You should be able to at least read some of this and get a feel for what's going on.
Can you email that? Or?
Yeah, I'll email that out. Probably when I've done the recording, I'll email that as an attachment with the email to tell you that the recording's online.
Okay. Right.
Any questions, guys?
That's superb, that's all.
I think your heads have probably gone.
Can you use
Brilliant,
the same
Ray,
technique
thank
using
you.
Lightroom?
Say again?
Can you use the same technique using Lightroom?
No. Lightroom cannot do that because Lightroom can't do layers. So, and it does a bit of masking, but it doesn't do proper cutouts in the way that I was doing. So the short answer is no, but you can use Photoshop elements to do that. There's nothing I've used, apart from the jug and warping the flower around the jug, that I'm not sure if the latest version of Elements has warping, but I would expect it to. But if you're not on the latest version, you may not have the warping to wrap it around the jug. But other than that, there's nothing I've done that you can't do with Photoshop Elements. And again, doesn't have to be the latest versions. They can be, reasonable. Oh, the repeating pattern around the path on Photoshop, I said I used there was a script button and I selected from the list script follow path. I'm told that that's not available in all versions of Photoshop. So you may not be able to find that, excuse me, if you're on an older version of Photoshop or Photoshop Elements. But that's not the end of the world, because draw a circle, a path in the same way, and just manually place them. And if you've done the alignment thing, and maybe what I'll do is I'll send out the alignment thing to you as a file and get you started. You can just place them on the lines of that alignment star and with a circle as your guide. And if you haven't got that script available in your version of Photoshop or Elements, you can at least recreate it manually. But other than that, you should be able to use any old version of Photoshop. Colin did say that he'd started to use Corel Painter Essentials 7, which is a 40 quid product. I've got it, but I've spun it up, but I've not tried to use it for this purpose. But he said he was enjoying it and having fun with it. Whether that makes it easier or not, I don't know. But when I get time, I might have a little go at that. And if it is easier or it's got some neat little things in it, I'll let you guys know. And, you know, maybe that's cheaper than buying the latest version of Photoshop for you. But Affinity and a few other products should be able to do the same thing.
Very good, Ray. Very good.
Anything else? Tracy, are you able, you've got no microphone, but if you've got a question, stick it in the chat line and I'll pick it up. Okay, well, in that case, we'll call it a day. Just a quick reminder to say that the submissions date for steps is this Friday. So if you can get them in by this Friday, that will be good. And if you've sent them and haven't had an acknowledgement email from me within a day or two, then I haven't received them. So I normally acknowledge every files that I receive. And some have come in today and I haven't acknowledged them yet. So, but within the next day, I should acknowledge everything I've received. Okay, guys, if that's it, I will say ta-ra. At the moment, I've got nothing to talk about next week.
Don't believe it.
So if you've got any ideas or suggestions, let me know. But at the moment, I haven't got a clue. So, so let me know. I suppose there's one other thing to say. With the barbecue, everyone seems to be up for that.
Whoa, Ziggy.
Not sure everyone's up for face-to-face meetings back inside, and I, understand that. In looking at the current guidelines, we can't meet in any more than 6 people at a time. So that means for the Barbie, we would have to be separated into groups of no more than 6 people. And likewise, if we were to have an indoor meeting, we are kind of pushing the limits of the rules at the moment. But I think with the Barbie, we might be able to get away with the rules on the basis that you can meet in groups of 6. And as long as those groups don't intermingle, then that's fine. But the guidelines may change by then. And if they do, we'll obviously abide by those. And then there's one other idea we had, which is, and I think Leslie, you suggested this, and that's going out with our cameras, go for a photographic walk. Now, again, we're allowed to do that as long as the group sizes are no more than 6. So what we thought we could do is we could assign you to a group of 6 and assign that group of 6 to a meeting place, and then all the groups will meet in different places. And then as long as you stay in your group of 6, socially distanced within the group as usual, but as long as you stay with your group and the groups don't intermingle, then we're following the current guidelines. So if you're up for that, if you'd like to do a photographic walk, maybe in Newbury or somewhere, then we can arrange that. But I just wanted to get your feedback before we commit to that. So what I'll probably do is do a Google sign-up sheet, and that will assign you to a group of 6. So if you want to be with other people, then we'll need to give you a way of indicating that too. But that's the current thinking. Trying to get us back face-to-face without being face-to-face. Back-to-back, maybe. Walk around Newbury as a group of 6, all facing outwards. Okay, guys. Thanks very much.
Great.
See you all
Right.
soon.
Thank you, Ray.
Ta-ta.
Thank you. Very good, Ray.